And we are live and on the air. Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Zach Abdel. Zach Abdel is my chosen Jewish Hebrew name. I am here with my rabbi, the rabbi that was personally responsible for leading me out of darkness and into the light of Judaism, though I don't know if he claims to be much anymore these days. But Rabbi Asher Meza, a man that I highly respect and honor, because it was his guidance that originally led me on the path to Orthodox Judaism from trying to basically live according to Karaite, a very loose form of Karaite Judaism, or strict Judaism. And so what we're going to do today is we're just going to chat a little bit about journeys. There's a movement right now in Orthodox Jewish circles. And if you've seen any of my pictures from 4 years ago, I had the 2-foot-long beard, and even you, about a year and a half ago, Rav, you had the long payouts, yeah.
That's right. That's
right. And so there's a tremendous move out of Chabad Judaism into secularism, which is a difficult transition because people are being ostracized. There's a whole lot of very awkward and difficult things going on for people in the Orthodox community. And so what we're going to talk about today is I just want to pose some simple questions. I'm going to let Rabbi Asher introduce himself and give a brief introduction, but we're just going to talk about secularism and how he feels about it, how he feels about Jews moving into secularism, losing their faith because of their associations, because of their belief systems. I mean, it's no secret that a lot of Chabad believe in Rabbi Schneerson being the Messiah, which is problematic, and all sorts of things. And so people are starting to ask questions. They're starting to get into scientific inquiry. They're starting to read books and get on the internet and all sorts of things, and they're being exposed to things they did not know. Textual criticism, for one. Did Moshe Rabbeinu, did he write all 5 books of the Torah? And these questions, as they're discovering their own answers and going through their journey, is leading a lot of Jews into secularism. And so I find myself also as a adjunct and sort of a rogue biblical scholar, reading text in Hebrew and trying to dig to the basis of things, and really myself having questions and having dismissed them for a long time, now starting to basically go, okay, is this really necessary, and so forth. So Rabbi Asher, I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself and share things, and then we'll get into some general questions. Is that cool?
That's great. So my name is Rabbi Asher Meza. I have an organization called Torah Judaism International. I have a website, a few websites, one of them called doordea.com, which is the think tank of the Dor Daim, which are pretty much a group that existed in Yemen over 100 years ago that didn't put up with crap. And in their spirit, we also strive not to put up with crap, anything altering the eternal, undisputed message of the Almighty, which is what's contained in the 5 books of Moses and what's sanctioned within the 5 books of Moses. So what we do, we are ethicists and moralists first and foremost, and Jews specifically. We have no axe to grind. Goodness is our religion. I mean, just by saying that, we can even align ourselves with many other humanists who have the same goals in mind but fall short in the long run because they have their philosophies ultimately catching up with them. And I think that's what I really want to touch on tonight. What's a strong foundation to use as the catalyst to bring this world closer to whatever we think that ideal state may be, whether it's ultimate peace, whether it's some sort of messianic age. We'll discuss that tonight. So my organization does something that most Orthodox Jewish organizations do not do, and that's that we encourage the world to consider Judaism. I mean, if we have the truth, if we feel that we have the antidote, it's only proper to share it and praiseworthy to share it. I mean, something that Judaism and Jews do not do, not because Jewish law or the Bible tells them not to do so, but because of tradition. So we try to strip away a lot of that tradition. And I look forward to great questions, and hopefully I could give you some great answers. So that being said, I'll pass it back to Zach.
All right, Rabbi Asher. Okay, first question is, what are your general thoughts on the sort of exodus that is taking place right now in Orthodox Judaism, with so many lifelong from preconception Jews becoming secular and going OTD? OTD is off the derech.
Right. I don't blame secular Jews for not embracing Orthodox Judaism. Not because there's something wrong with the secular, but there's something wrong with the Orthodox. They have made Judaism look ridiculous. And the only way anyone could either adhere to Orthodox Judaism is either by being born into it or by having some sense of belonging, in some way, a feeling of joining a gang, being part of a group, but not because they're trying to fill some altruistic urge that's itching inside, which is, I think, one of the main reasons people become Christian, and also one of the main reasons people become Muslim, because they hear some great ideas and they're thinking like, hey, it's my job to try to institute this messianic age or this caliphate for the good of the world. Orthodox Judaism does not offer that. Now, when I mean Orthodox Judaism, I mean the Judaism practiced by the fundamentalist Jews nowadays. Now, Orthodox Judaism was a term created by the Reform to label traditional Jews as backward and not progressive. Although authentic Judaism does offer all this. The Judaism that comes straight from the Bible and what it sanctions. In other words, the rulings of our sages do not contradict this ideal, this altruistic ideal, which has always been the main purpose for everything that ever happened in the Jewish world, from the Almighty appointing Abraham and his descendants to be a light into the nations. For what? So they can hoard the Torah to themselves, so they can ultimately have all the non-Jews of the world be their slaves? Of course not. That wouldn't be a good God. That wouldn't be a God that I would want to worship. And that's not a God that I encourage anyone to worship. I teach that the Almighty loves everybody. And I think that he wants us to love him not because he's God, but because he's good. So tonight I want to demonstrate how our God, the Almighty, is first and foremost a good God. And then secondary, all these other titles, omnipotent, omnipresent, all these things are secondary. What matters is what works. And living a religious lifestyle, according to the instructions laid down to us in the Torah, is what works. It's been the only book that's been able to civilize humanity. Of course, it's very simple for an atheist or a humanist nowadays to also claim to be ethical and moral without adhering to the Torah. Why? Because they're standing on the shoulders of giants. It's easy for them to claim to be moral when their great-grandparents were either Muslim or Christian or Jewish themselves.
Right. So let's talk about that for a second. Let's talk now. For those who don't know, Dor De'ah is, and excuse the term, basically Rambamist or Mishneh Torah Judaism. It's Judaism based off of the codification from Hazal, compiled together under the nom de plume, under the hand of Rambam, Moses Maimonides. So personally, I believe that if there is a genuine form of Judaism, that it would be quote-unquote Rambamist style Judaism. So please forgive that term. I know that's not one that you're very familiar, that you don't like too much. But so let's talk about ethics and morality. So is it possible, and because you touched on this, and that's why I'm interjecting here, is it possible for a secular Jew, secular person with Jewish ancestry, secular person with any type of religious background, is it possible for that person, without being strictly religious, to be a moral and ethical person? And on what grounds can they or can they not be moral and ethical?
Mm-hmm. I think the only way they can ultimately be moral and ethical is if they adhere to an unchanging code that's not altered by their desires. If murdering is wrong today, for me, it must also be wrong for you and my neighbor across the street. Now, this is not something that a humanist could really come to consider an absolute ideal. But they'll say, like, well, perhaps murder is wrong for you. Who are you to impose that on me? we, from a very elementary stage, know that, or at least those of us who consider ourselves religious, we know that murder is wrong because God says it's wrong, and He's our absolute authority. However,
Right.
all of us still, coming to religion, had to validate the existence of God as first being ethical. Putting ourselves in the place of the Israelites coming out of Egypt, the mercy bestowed on humanity was displayed all through the Hebrew Bible. We first had to validate and fall in love with the God of the Bible, of what Christians call the Old Testament, and then come to the conclusion that if God says something, it must be true. I don't think that murder is wrong just because God says it's wrong. But I think that murder is wrong because it ultimately doesn't make the world a better place. I think that God is more preoccupied with results than labels. But it's a coincidence that...
So a humanist...
Mhm.
I'm sorry, but a humanist would say that they will not murder because ultimately it serves humanity, hence the term humanism. So they'll say, I don't need God, per se, to cause me to not murder someone. I don't need God, or I don't need religion. I definitely don't need strict religious observance to cause me to not murder someone. It's intrinsic within me. It's innate. I mean, I just simply shouldn't murder because it's not my place. And regardless of, now we're not talking about moral relativism. We're talking about murder. I mean, in particular, which was one of the Ten Commandments. So the secular humanist would go, okay, so I understand your point. I hear your argument that God is good and God says not to murder. So I'm not going to murder. Not because God says not to murder, but because I know within my heart of hearts as an intelligent and rational human being that it's wrong to inflict pain and harm and hurt and so forth onto my fellow human being. What would you say to that?
He could only speak from a personal perspective. He can't say that I'm saying this as some sort of absolute truth, because the other humanists will say, well, are you now making yourself God, or are you now making your ideals God? Mm-hmm. And that's the difference between adhering to a code and adhering to a bunch of personal opinions that the guy across the street, who may also claim to be a humanist, may not adhere to. So only because you say it's wrong to murder really puts it in a very subjective area. I mean, you can't run a society like that. Well, if you have a society that believes it's wrong to murder because the God that created everything said it's wrong to murder, is the only way things could function correctly. So yes, if you would come out with Zach's little red book and put that murder is wrong, then perhaps society could run or could function ethically, but right at that moment you'd elevate yourself to the status of God. So I'm talking about...
So then, well, I was going to say, so then the question becomes, the follow-up question becomes, well, okay, so I know you're talking about murder. Now, you and I both know from a Hebraic standpoint, murder basically means to take the life of an innocent. However, the secular humanist would, specifically the atheistic secular humanist who rejects Torah, rejects the Bible in all of its forms, would go, okay, so what about the instances where Hashem, God, where he says to murder, he says to kill children, which from a humanistic standpoint are innocent. He says to murder women who are just following their husbands. I mean, he condones murder. He says, to kill your children who curse you or hit you. It says
kill and murder
are
not the same thing, by the way.
Right, which is what I said. From the Hebraic standpoint, means take an innocent life. Now, from a Torah standpoint, to kill means that you've done something of death according to Torah. And so cursing out your parent or striking your parent or getting married and not being a virgin, in your father's household, these are issues worthy of death according to Torah. What the humanists would say was that, well, that's according to you. I am not going to kill my daughter for having had sex or having her hymen ruptured before she got married. I'm not going to kill her, nor I'm going to condone anyone stoning her because it fits inside of the religious norm. What would you say to that?
But that's more of a Karaite argument. I mean, Orthodox Jews who adhere also to the oral law know that children were never just killed by their parents, that was more of a command to take your child to the court, which by definition made it that no kid would ever die for these sins because no parents would ever cross that line and take their kid to the magistrate to have them killed. These are very subjective areas. Even with that portion in the 5 books of Moses, where it's actually Moses and not God who commands the Israelites to kill women and children, I've heard scholars like Dennis Prager even really dissect that verse and show that God never really commanded this, that it was Moses who said it. Now
that's pretty deep. Now that would silence a lot of the, because one main issue with atheists and secular humanists and skeptics, especially skeptics of the Bible, they'll say, well, God is, God forbid, misogynistic and spiteful and jealous and vengeful. Basically, he acts like a human,
I don't really think that these arguments make or break Judaism in any way. I mean, even though there may be some portion in the 5 books that we don't understand so clearly, although all these portions are explained in the oral law from a practical perspective on how do we actually carry these things out, and they're usually explained in a legalistic court setting instead of parents just slaughtering their kids for right. So
and a lot of people aren't aware, and because I also have gotten this argument a lot too with dealing with the Talmud and people's issues with Talmud and so forth. The Talmud is basically case law. It's no different than in the U.S. when you have an argument based on a very specific law written, and then the argument among all 10 rabbis, whatever, is basically this is how this law is specifically and or should be specifically carried out with all that we know currently, specifically with Haka and and all that sort of thing. This is how it's supposed to be carried out. And so most people don't understand the Talmud, that the Talmud is not saying this is what you do. It's giving several different arguments concerning a particular law and several different opinions concerning a particular law, and in a lot of cases coming up with a conclusion on how, what everybody should consent to. So, and most people aren't aware of that. They just, toss the Karaite, argument is typically, well, God didn't say it. It's basically all the arguments of men, So no, absolutely. So it's great that you're bringing up, Talmud, of course, births, Mishneh Torah. So basically, what you're saying is that according to, and I'm gonna use this term, case law, Talmudic, halakha, basically the issue is that nobody. I mean, it'd be very difficult in a Hebraic society for somebody to get killed for most of the death offenses laid out in Torah. Is that correct?
Correct. Well, we don't even see it in history. We see the catastrophe, the death toll left behind movements that had a humanistic approach to it, to the extent that communism or socialism was ever humanistic. We see the results of this. However, at least from a Judaic perspective, we don't see carnage of kids being crucified or hung or stoned. I mean, it just doesn't exist. So we're really comparing apples with cupcakes. I mean, it doesn't compare. I'm not trying to say that I could really explain and justify every command in the 5 books of Moses, but only because I disagree with a concept 5% of the time or even 10% of the time does not mean that I disagree with a movement.
So would you say that you tend to take a more practical approach to Torah Judaism? In other words, it's okay, and I've heard you share this before, it's okay to disagree with something, possibly not even speak it out loud or in public, but it's okay to disagree, and possibly even okay to disagree in public, but still do it. Is that accurate?
That's part of Jewish law. I mean, part of Jewish law is that the concept of the Zaken Mamre, the rebellious elder, is not someone who disagrees with the ruling of the Sanhedrin, but it's someone who disagrees and teaches otherwise. However, we're taught in Exodus, do not follow the majority to do evil. In terms of rulings of a court, sometimes it's a mitzvah to break a halacha. Now, these are things that most people don't teach. There's no instance anywhere that ever taught that the Sanhedrin ever became corrupt. But if they would have, these guys who stood up against it would be called heroes. I mean, we have whole tractates in the Talmud that deal with the errors of the Sanhedrin. However, we're not really discussing the errors of the Sanhedrin here, but the possible errors in the Torah, which I really don't believe exist because they're explained by the oral law. But from a Karaite perspective, I see where it would be problematic. But even from a Karaite perspective, I would realize that it's not enough to nullify the only belief system that really has been able to civilize society. I mean, something
Mm-hmm.
that humanism still really hasn't done, or is
Mm-hmm.
taking all the credit for in our modern day society. But really, like I said, because they're standing on the shoulders of giants, because they came from parents who had an ethical background that was built off the Bible.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about mysticism, because I know that you're not for a extreme literal interpretation of the Hebrew Bible. But what about the sort of opposite end of that literal spectrum, the getting uber mystical? What are your thoughts on that? And because this is also part of why a lot of Orthodox are walking away too. It's like, well, I mean, dude, there's no demon chickens, and there's
Right,
no,
right.
you'd have to understand Jewish superstition to understand that reference. But there's just, I mean, it's just not there. And so I mean, what am I doing all this superstitious stuff for? People don't know that the throwing of the salt and the the spitting over the shoulder and some of these things are Yiddish customs, not necessarily quote unquote Jewish. More German. The German Jewish influence, sort of, Eastern European Jew sort of influence. It has nothing to do with Judaism, just cultural things. And so a lot of mysticism has crept up into Judaism, which sort of semi gave birth to some of the mysticism that exists in Christianity and Islam. But a lot of Orthodox Jews, especially Jewish men, are walking away because they're going, yeah, all this mystical crap I just can't even deal with anymore. What are your thoughts on that?
I mentioned before that the word spiritual or spirituality does not exist in the Hebrew language. I mean, it exists in modern Hebrew, but it doesn't exist in biblical Hebrew. If we really analyze the lives of our patriarchs, of our biblical heroes like King David, and they weren't spiritual individuals. They were men of action. We even know that King David is the ultimate archetype of the religious Jewish male, a man of the book, a man of the sword, not someone who prays for answers, but someone who gets up and acts. Now, spirituality tells you to look within yourself, while I think that ethical monotheism gets you to ask a question of what can I do for my fellow man. So I really don't think that they mix. I believe in the concept of the spiritual, but spirituality is the attempt to tap into the spiritual, to control and manipulate some sort of force that may be mentioned in the Bible or even in the Talmud. And it's really just a waste of time. It conflicts with free will. The notion that we can change our outcome apart from our action, from our ethical actions or immoral actions, plain witchcraft. I mean, it's trying to control people around you, situations around you, health, just via technicality or loopholes in the text. It has nothing to do with Judaism at all.
Right.
I mean, even though some portions may be mentioned in the prophets or in the writing, they're not explicitly mentioned in the Torah, which is the only code that we build doctrine on. So, I mean, I believe that it's disposable completely.
Right. So before we get into textual criticism, can you talk a little bit about what you just were sort of hinting on with the not using the greater body of Tanakh, which, or the prophets and other writings, not using that as a basis for halakha, or normative Jewish practice? If you share a little bit about that.
Sure. The one principle that exists in anything that we try to elevate and live by is that that thing cannot destroy itself. In other words, it can't continue morphing and stretching and changing its appearance to such an extent that in a few years it won't resemble what you started with. So if the Word of God be altered via the centuries, by the rabbis, by the way, because they were the ones who canonized the Tanakh, the men of the Great Assembly, and even portions of the Tanakh weren't even canonized till after the death of Jesus. If they're able to change the Almighty's message in any way, if they can make an X become a Y, then it ultimately becomes man's religion. Now, the only code, the only set of books that everyone agrees, it's the undisputed Word of God, whether it's all of it or just the instructions within it, is the Pentateuch, is the Chumash, the 5 books of Moses. Everything else is pretty much disposable and secondary. With the job of the prophet wasn't to institute new ideas or to explain the complexity of the unity of God. Their sole purpose was to bring Israel back to Torah. The Torah is the basis. As a matter of fact, all the major monotheistic religions, one of the only things they can agree on, that it's the 5 books of Moses that was the Almighty's first, and in Judaism's opinion, last revelation to humanity. So that's why I never understood how a Karaite could say, I believe in thus because it appears in the book of Psalms, or I believe in this because it appears in the
Right.
book of Isaiah. When even
Right.
if you compare the
There
books of
are no
Isaiah,
psalmistic prophecies. They just simply don't exist.
hmm.
There are no prophecies in the Psalms. It's basically
Right, well, Christians would
David
disagree with you.
Hamelech.
Right.
Right,
Sure.
but when you study the history as outlined in Chronicles and Kings, David Hamelech is basically just saying, okay, here's what I'm going through. This is what happened. Deliver me from this. I know I'm going to come out on the other side. But like you said, he's still a man of action. And, and if he's not saying it, then it's some scribes or some of the chief priests or, whatever, writing songs on his behalf and ascribing them, saying, hey, we're dedicating this song to the king. So I'm baffled consistently at this notion of psalmistic prophecy. It's a foreign concept for sure.
Right.
Um,
But even the Psalms were composed by the rabbis. I'm not saying the actual Psalms, but I mean the order of the Psalms. Everyone agrees that the whole book of Psalms is not written by King David. I mean, there's many Psalms that are written
right.
about King David. So I mean, it's either the Levites that are writing it, something else. Now, they're clearly beautiful works, and they inspire you to get closer to God. But it's not God trying to tell you something in there, or like if He's trying to
Right.
tell you anything, I mean, He's telling you, go back to Torah. That's what the Psalms reiterate. I mean, Psalm chapter 1,
Right.
he who meditates on this law day and night will be like a tree planted by the rivers of water. I mean, it's like, your word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. I mean, it's always Torah, Torah, Torah. It's always been
Right.
the basis of that. So like people trying to build a society of something that appears in Ezekiel. It's funny how the version of the book of Isaiah we have nowadays actually has whole portions that are different from the Isaiah that appears in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Why? Because the rabbis never instituted a system of copying down the books of the prophets or the writings. And I'm pretty sure that many of them were just copied straight out of memory. Now, this never existed for the 5 books of Moses, at least according to tradition. According to tradition, I mean, we even have it today, every scribe who writes a Sefer Torah copies another Sefer Torah. And even today, if you compare all the Torah scrolls in the world, they only really differ by 1 or 2 letters. Nothing that changes the message in the text. Compare that to the different variants of the New Testaments that float around out there, and the Apocrypha. I mean, there's some apocryphal books that are quoted in the Talmud, like Ben Sura, that for some reason never made it into our canon nowadays. So it's to say that someone's going to build doctrine or belief on anything outside the 5 books of Moses is really walking away from Judaism. And realizing this could never work. I mean, once you actually do the history of who compiled these works, I mean, it says in the Talmud that it was Rabbi Akiva who argued to include Sefer Yehezkel, the book of Ezekiel, and Shir Hashirim, and Kohelet, because they weren't going to include it. But we don't worship Rabbi Akiva. We don't think that the Sanhedrin had prophecy that God is telling him, or even to create a canon. I believe in the words of the prophets and what's contained in the canon, but I don't think that the Almighty demands me to believe in it. I think He only expects me to believe in the 5 books of Moses and what it sanctions, i.e. the ritualistic and ceremonial rulings of the Sanhedrin.
Right. That's a great answer. Because I think that's probably where a lot of people, including myself, especially as we get into textual criticism, which is our next topic, we start to struggle. Because, I mean, we know it's accepted in Judaism basically to go, okay, prophets not so much, other writings not so much. Of course, rejecting the New Testament altogether, definitely rejecting the Book of Mormon, rejecting the Quran, but saying, Jewish books by Jews, okay, yeah, we get that, but not so much like we do with Torah. And so, but once you get into textual criticism of Torah, which rabbis who are leaving the isolated and insular yeshivas in Israel and starting to go to still religious yeshivas, but that have the yeshivas that have or colleges that have the secular tint to them that get into textual criticism, they're starting to go, wait. Who wrote what now? And how many people? And what do you mean Moshe Rabbeinu didn't write, all 5 books? What do you mean? And so it's starting to become problematic. what do you say to uh, modern day textual criticism that has come up with some pretty accurate? I mean, come on. We know for sure without even getting into external textual criticism, but we can just read the Torah itself, and we know that there are certain parts of the Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu did not write. He couldn't have written about his death because he was dead. you know, um,
Mm-hmm.
we know that it wasn't all given at once on Sinai. Couldn't have happened because it says that once they left Sinai, there was additional instructions given because of additional situations that arose.
Mm-hmm.
Why does this never occur to your average Orthodox Hasid in theological yeshiva? Why does it never occur, these particular questions, and then once they actually start looking into it, it's like this earth-shattering thing to their faith?
Because they've been following men instead of following God. Now, I'm not trying to justify their arguments. I mean, I don't lump myself in with the mainline Orthodox movement.
Mm-hmm.
I'm of the opinion, like Rav Tzadok Gaon teaches, that every time you hear the word Torah, it's only speaking about the instructions within the Torah. Now, that is a very radical view that is not held by a lot of people. But I'd rather
I agree
not.
with that.
Okay.
I agree with that. I mean, as a one of the, first things I started to see right off the bat is that if we're going to call anything, especially when the Torah itself talks about the Sefer Torah, it's not talking about all the fluffer stuff.
Right.
It's
Right, the narrative.
talking about,
Right, it's not speaking about the narrative.
what was placed in the ark, alongside Aaron's rod that budded, and and the manna. What was placed in there? It wasn't all this
Right.
narrative. It wasn't all this other stuff. It was just the thou shalt and thou shalt not.
Like
So,
Sefer
I'm sorry, go
HaMitzvot.
ahead.
Like the book.
Right.
Like nowadays we have books like on the Taryag Mitzvot, like books that enumerate the 613 commandments. Perhaps it was that. Regardless, this doesn't make or break Judaism. I mean, this is not why I believe Judaism is authentic, because I could validate or not validate that whether the Torah was given all at once or in portions, this and that. I mean, this is things that people who have too much time in their hands try to argue about just because they have already venerated a previous rabbi who came up with this position. So they have this preconceived notion that they do not want to squash for whatever reason. Like maybe people don't like change. They think if they start questioning older rabbis, and they're going to start questioning everything. I don't have that problem. I validate
Right.
Judaism from a completely different standpoint. And it doesn't really
Mm-hmm.
really change the religion to me if Moses didn't write all the 5 books of Moses, or like if all of it wasn't given all at once. I mean, it doesn't really change anything. So, I mean, I don't know really how it's relevant.
Right. Well, because you got to understand, with both strict Christianity, with strict Islam, well, of course, Islam almost pretty much denies Torah altogether. With strict Orthodoxy, you pretty much get one answer. Torah is divine, fell straight from heaven, out of the golden mouth of Hashem, and boom, there you have it, and it in its perfect form. Don't question it, don't look at it sideways, nothing. To the point to where, now I love the Torah scroll. I love the Torah service portion of Shabbat. I love it. I love the reverence that's given to the text, and I love the fact that it's looked for history, guiding the community, and so forth. I mean, this is all very beautiful, and singing Torah, Torah. This is all a very beautiful. It's a moving experience. It's emotionally moving. However, coming out of very strict interpretive and very strict insular religious societies, you got to know that to even remotely question the divinity of any portion of the Torah, the general Torah as we have it today, is basically blasphemy. And so, yeah, it's an important question that comes up, especially for Hasids coming out of yeshiva, and they're like, and they're getting exposed to the other thing, especially reading things online. It's like, what do you mean Moshe Rabbeinu didn't write every word
Right.
of the 5 books? So this becomes problematic to their faith. It also becomes, it becomes a crisis, after so long. And so it doesn't come from nowhere. It's like I guess the lies. I mean, is that even a good thing to say? Or the lies, the way in which Torah is presented, the way in which Judaism is presented, is perfection personified and out of the mouth of God, and the rabbis are basically perfect, so much so that God listens to the rabbis, you know?
Right. As a matter of fact, for this notion that one has to believe that Moses wrote the 5 books of Moses or one's a heretic, even though, I mean, it does appear in the Mishnah Torah, I don't believe that this is a ruling actually clarified or explained by the Sanhedrin. Chazal may have mentioned this, but most people really don't even understand how to properly understand the Sanhedrin. They cannot institute belief. The Sanhedrin cannot institute belief. They could only institute practice. Only the Torah can institute belief. Now, amongst themselves, they could have a tradition. What's the extent of that belief? Who's to gauge that? Certainly not a court. This is the problem of the Rambamist movement, or people who follow codifiers and rabbis more than the Torah itself. People who don't know how to understand the rabbis. Now, I believe that the Sanhedrin and Chazal, they're very necessary to keep us progressing in a uniform manner. But they cannot establish metaphysical reality, only because they would rule that the Messiah should come tomorrow. It's not going to happen. I mean,
right.
If they had that power, like, why didn't they just rule themselves out of the exile, right? I mean, like, they know their powers were only from a civil legislative perspective, not instituting spiritual or metaphysical reality, which is how I think many rabbis read their works nowadays. I mean, they think that if the Chafetz Chaim said something, it's like if God says it. I mean, if Rashi makes a comment on something in the 5 books, I mean, it might as well be in there, and it's very problematic. I'm actually against people studying the Torah with a commentary.
Well, there's a ruling that says that if 3 Rabbanim disagree, all 3 are the Word of God.
But you mean agree or disagree? I'm sorry.
No, if they all disagree, if 3 Rabbanim disagree, all 3 opinions are the Word of God.
It appears in Chagiga. I mean, it says Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim Chaim, that these and these are even the words of the living God. That is only talking about the ceremonial, ritualistic portions that the Sanhedrin had the authority to institute, right? You know, like when we light like the Hanukkah candles, we say Asher Kedishanu Ritzotav Etzivanu, right? You know, we're saying who sanctified us and commanded us to light candles. I mean, did God ever command us to light candles? Maimonides explains that means that, according to Parshat Shoftim, Deuteronomy 17, he instituted the Sanhedrin, who acts under his authority to institute these ceremonial laws to kind of keep us on the same page, but not that the opinion of a rabbi is the Word of God. It may carry the weight of the Word of God in ceremonial matters only, but only because it's guarding and uplifting and amplifying the Word of God, not because it in itself is the Word of God.
Right. Okay, so moving on, next topic, and we've got some viewers, so if anybody wants to ask a question, there should be a link where you can actually type your question, and Rabbi Asher will do his best to try to answer the question for you. So, all right, evolution. We know that Rambam said that where science and your interpretation of Torah conflict, you should adjust your interpretation of Torah. I'm paraphrasing. Theory of evolution, speciation, and so forth. Humans share 98% of their DNA with chimps and bonobos. You know, we see parts of other animals' DNA in the genetic code of humans, but it's switched off. Following up the mammalian line, is this problematic for Torah Judaism or no?
Well, first we have to know that the theory of evolution is just a theory. I mean, it's not a fact. And the Rambam teaches, as his personal opinion, that the world was created ex nihilo, right, from nothing. That it really wasn't an evolutionary process. But again, I mean, this is just his opinion. He also does say in Mor Nevuchim, in the Guide for the Perplexed, that science and Torah does not conflict. But the question is not what is Torah, but what is science. I actually made a video on creationism and Judaism. And in this video, I did the research. Well, first, doing the research, I had to define what is science. So I went to the Modern Webster Dictionary and I looked up science. And its definition, now I'm paraphrasing, is pretty much anything that a scientific authority agrees on is science, to a certain extent. Theories and all these things fall into the realm of science. And then I kind of felt, being a conservative and a traditional guy, I kind of felt that was a bit of a convoluted answer. So I went back to the older Webster Dictionary of the 1800s. And I was surprised to see that it gave a different answer for science. It said something that could only be proven over and over again. Now, I'm paraphrasing. I mean, you guys could look it up. But it said something that's factual, something that is observed and will give you the same result over and over again.
Right.
It gave the basic definition of science.
Right. Well, now what you're talking about is you're talking about scientific theory. Science, the word science itself just simply means knowledge, or the attempt to attain knowledge. When you get into scientific theory is not the same as general theory. As in other words, I'm guessing. I have a theory of X.
Right.
Scientific theory is based on exactly what you're saying. It has been tested, it has been retested, it's been peer-reviewed, other people have tested, and they
Well, you mentioned evolution.
Right.
That's why, like, I'm mentioning
right.
this. Now, evolution is technically not a science.
Right. And so the evolutionary theory, according to the scientific theory, evolutionary theory is that we predict that we will see certain traits and we'll see certain branches in the phylogenetic tree, and so therefore when we basically study these things, we see simulators, we see branches, and all this sort of thing. We see speciation today. We see birds basically over the last 50 or 60 years. We've seen an entire new species of bird evolve, and now they cannot mate with the other species. They're infertile one toward the other.
So I think the question really is, what do you think the Rambam meant when he said Torah and science doesn't conflict? What do you think he meant, scientific theory or actual science?
I guess the question I'm really asking is that since scientists, a lot of which who are secular Jews, by the way, since scientists continue to come up with the same answer for the evolutionary model, the evolutionary theory, they keep coming up with the same answer, and the more they dig, the more they find the same answers, basically proving that humanity basically evolved over time. I mean, we have Neanderthal, we have Paleolithic man, and hunter-gatherers, and we see these societies evolve over time. We see the strata, in the geologic table, and so forth, and we can tell, and they predict and say, well, if you dig in this layer, you're going to find this kind of fossil, and that happens all across the globe. Same thing with humanity. You won't see any human fossils below this certain layer. You won't see any dinosaur fossils below this certain layer, and so forth and so on. And so the more they test, and especially now they can get into genetics and genomes and so forth and so on. So I guess, what do you say, number one, to the fact that humans and apes share 98% of the exact same genetic code? What do you say, number two, to the fact that you can see a very clear taxonomic tree from the mammalian line, in mammals, and then get into Homo and Homo sapiens and so forth? How does evolution and its current understanding, and the fact that it keeps testing positive, in its assertions, how does that relate, or what does that do to the Genesis narrative? I mean, and the Jewish understanding of the Jewish narrative, of the Genesis narrative.
Even though I'm a 6-day creationist, 6 day and 1 day of rest, I don't believe that evolution, if it was proven to be a fact, in any way destroys Judaism. As a matter of fact, I think Judaism, modern-day Judaism, unlike Christianity and Islam, has gone great lengths to justify the theory of evolution with Torah. We have rabbis like Rabbi Slifkin, Gerald Schroeder, with a PhD from MIT, Orthodox teacher in Israel, tying it in. How can they attempt to tie it in? I mean, how can they write countless books on the topic? Is because it technically really does not conflict. My argument is, if the Bible is full of miracles and full of things that are unexplainable, like, why is it that people draw the line when it comes to evolution? And 6 days of creation instead of 6 billion years, right? I mean, if God could create man according to the narrative from the dust of the ground, why couldn't He create the world in 6 days?
But then we're getting into speculation, and this is why Orthodox Jews are losing their faith because they're going, wait a minute, this is being proven over and over again, and so in order for me
It's
to
not
accept,
proven. I mean, it's a theory, but it doesn't make or
no,
break the religion.
no, but you understand the difference between a scientific theory and a general theory, right? You understand that a scientific theory is not just, oh, we guess. A scientific theory is something that's proven over and over again when you put something through the same testing parameters.
But the only thing that could either make or break the religion is science. I mean, it's not scientific theory. I mean, someone who adheres to the theory of evolution is just as religious as someone who adheres to the 6 days of creation. I mean, to the point that even
now there are creationists. Now, in that respect, there are creationists, both rabbis, Christians, and imams, who all say, now the Christian thing is saying, well, an epoch, 1,000 years a day, days and 1,000 years, and so forth. And so, therefore, we don't know. And then there's the first Earth and second Earth, with the Earth being millions of years. Then Adam and Eve are basically the byproduct after everything else, all the other men were wiped out, and so forth. And so, therefore, it's not surprising that we're finding these fossils in this Earth that existed before. And rabbis are now saying that, well, in the beginning doesn't mean 6,000 years ago. In the beginning means in the beginning.
For sure.
And so, in the beginning means,
I don't think it makes or breaks, the faith in any way. I mean, it's just food for thought. But I believe the Bible, and I believe what it says in the Bible, and I believe in 6 days. I mean, 6 literal days of creation. I mean, we keep Shabbat on the 7th day, not every 7 billion years. It says that the Almighty will labored for 6 days and rested on the 7th. Now, the question is, why is it so easy for a believer to believe that God made a donkey speak, but for some reason that wasn't able to make the chicken before the egg? That which is pretty much, we know that Adam couldn't have been born with a belly button, that he created things how they were, fully formed. To the point that even dinosaurs appear in the creation story. The Tananim Hagedolim, the big lizards. It doesn't make or break anything. It clearly doesn't argue for a humanistic lifestyle, something that, has never worked. But we should really be searching for answers here, and what could move us ethically to a better world. And I don't really think humanism has what it takes on its own. And I think that it's taken a lot from religion and is a religion in itself.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a couple more questions, and then I'm going to ask you some tough questions. Okay?
Okay. Sure.
All right, so we talked about evolution and the fact that it's possible to still maintain one's faith and believe that the Earth is millions of years old. I'm sorry, and to believe that the creation didn't take place over 6 days and that man evolved and so forth. Age of the Earth, hundreds of millions of years old, constant evidence coming, up over and over again, some, 30 or 40 different methods of radiometric dating, and also the geological table in transitionary time, all demonstrating the Earth to be older than 6,000 years. Aside from that, the age of the cosmos, in which, according, being able to, speed of light, considering, number one, where we are in the Milky Way, the fact that we're not at the center of the Milky Way, considering where we are in one of the spiral arms of the Milky Way, and then also our ability to witness stars and galaxies and all this sort of thing from our position, which indicates that these things are billions of years old based on how long it's taken the light to reach us at this point, and the fact that we're now witnessing the death of stars that happened hundreds of millions of years ago because we're seeing the light coming from those things as it is now. Age of the Earth, age of the cosmos, as it pertains to maintaining a strictly religious lifestyle. Can you believe in a couple of billion-year-old cosmos and still be, a faithful religious Jew?
Science is based on observing things to the best of our ability. Things that every few years change. Being in the scientific world is really never having to say you're sorry and saying you're wrong. Although religion are constantly under the spotlight.
Well, science is too. Science is constantly changing its tune, and as they discover new things, they're basically saying, "Oh, you know what? We were wrong because as we dug deeper, we found out this to be true as opposed to this." That's why things are called theories. That's why things are called theories, because science will not.
So I think the Bible has a better track record in terms of having to go out and say that.
What about some of the historical and geological inaccuracies, as it's argued?
I'm not saying that everything the Bible claims to have occurred is provable, at least at this point. I don't even think that's the argument here. I mean, regardless, if the Bible was as easily disprovable, it wouldn't be on the level that it is today. I mean, science is constantly changing, but science could be inconsistent and still be, I guess, a viable alternative to like irreligious individuals to adhere to. But religion, right when people start finding little cracks here and there, people drop it completely and then really pay the price. They're really throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Okay, say that you have a problem with this, but to say that this is all false just because a couple of theories do not align with it.
So do you think that, especially now, because so many different issues are coming out, with people questioning their faith, questioning the things that they were taught, saying, well, this is not accurate, this can't be true, this can't be accurate, and what they're doing is they're walking out of Orthodox Judaism, and in walking out, they consider themselves to be sparing their children. I mean, you and I both know people who have been victims of sexual abuse in Jewish communities, I mean, rabbis, and now it's coming out that it's a very common thing, and Hasids are basically going, the ones that are going secular going, I don't want my kids anywhere around this stuff. If that means you don't get a chance to see your grandmother, then you just don't get a chance to see your grandmother. Are they wrong for doing that? Are they wrong for basically developing that kind of angst towards the religion, considering the things that they've witnessed of their friends and even things that they've been through?
I think they're wrong and naive thinking that the grass is greener in any way on the other side, that the angel they don't know is better than the devil they do know, which is the argument that atheists make all the time, that it's better to be without religion in some sort of secular haven than to suffer a little in a religious society. Like how those who
they're suffering
wanted to overthrow...
They're suffering in all societies. To assume that you create an atheist society that there won't be sex scandals is ridiculous. That's a silly notion because humans are humans. That's why in
we're
Islam,
searching for the lesser evil.
Right.
Right? And in any type of movement where a utopian society was the goal, mass murder and carnage followed. Those who fought against the Tsar because they thought he was so horrible realized that he was a Boy Scout compared to the Soviets. And the Soviets were not religious, while the Tsar was. I would argue that molestation, any type of immoral behavior, like based on a biblical standpoint, is far greater in a secular society than in a religious society.
But you base it on what? I mean, with all due respect, Ralph, I mean, what do you base that on? I mean, do you have any type of statistic that proves this to be the case?
Like, people collide with statistics, but I think that common sense is my biggest advocate here, that if you have a society that has standards and a society that doesn't technically have absolute standards, the society with amoral, not technically immoral, but an amoral approach to ethics is going to be less ethical. Ethical in the sense that
if we're talking about a secular... Well, secularism doesn't say no ethics. Secularism says 100% ethics. Secularism says don't steal, don't lie, don't cheat, don't cuss, don't...
I don't think they say that.
Not necessarily cuss.
I mean, they say that.
No, but secularism... But when they argue morality, they're saying anything that I would do to harm, like the whole thing, animal fighting. I mean, there's a lot of secularists that are against that, fighting, cockfighting and dogfighting and so forth. Okay. The sex abuse scandals, the child marriage, they consider that immoral and unethical.
On what basis?
Arranged marriages. I'm sorry?
On what basis would they consider that immoral and unethical if they're not adhering to some absolute standard? And how could, let's say, child molestation be wrong if it's consensual from a secular perspective?
Right. What they're saying is, once again, from a secular perspective, they're saying the law basically says that there's a statutory limit, which I have an issue with statutory law. I mean, I wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for both my grandmothers, at the age of 14 being married. I wouldn't even exist to 22 and 24-year-old men. But the
so it's okay for society to set the limits, but it's wrong for the Bible too.
Well, no, I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that they're an argument. Once again, with all due respect, and this is not to to be aggressive in any way, but the point is that there is a counter argument, and the counter argument is that they'll say that, well, the fact that the Bible says that you can take a female slave, of a young girl and have your sexual way with her, well, that's immoral. They'll argue that. And so what they'll say is morality is based on common sense. And so as secularists, And as humanists are saying, well, of course it's wrong to rape a child. Of course it's wrong
Yeah, but
to
how can they say of course from an authoritative perspective? A good humanist
well,
would say, "Who are you to impose your
well, because
values
you're
on me?"
forcing your will on someone else. If you rape someone, then you're forcing your will on them. If you and this is their issue by and large with religion too, because religion seeks to basically enforce a standard of morality that is not agreeable to all people. In other words, like let's say with Christianity, don't smoke, don't
Hmm.
drink, don't
So
curse, don't have a girlfriend on the side,
if a
which
30-year-old man is having
hmm
sex with a 12-year-old girl,
hmm
but it's consensual, from a
hmm
humanistic perspective, how would that be wrong?
if you don't have statutory law, in other words, if you live in a society, let's say you live in a secular society, and you don't have statutory law, it's impossible to argue that that's immoral. If you live in a society that has statutory law, and it is generally considered by the society to be a disdained thing, then it is highly possible that that society and those people within society would consider that an immoral thing because of the law that exists. Someone decided that it was immoral at one time. Now, that may change over time. I mean, just like with, you lived in Colorado at one point, with marijuana laws and so forth. These things, what made it immoral at one point and now it's moral? I mean, is marijuana any worse than Prozac? As a matter of fact,
Right.
it's better than Prozac. I mean, we know that for a fact. So society.
So I don't think the
Is,
Bible argues for the immorality of marijuana, but you're basically saying that legislators,
yeah, but
lawmakers,
religious people do.
establish morality.
But religious people, in the name of God, say that drinking is immoral. Say that even having a buzz is immoral. Say that
Because it appears in the
that
Bible.
smoking is immoral. I'm sorry.
It appears in the Bible that drunkenness is immoral. That's one of the things that the rebellious child is brought to the court for. Many examples of drunkenness: Lot, Noah.
Mm-hmm.
So I really don't see your argument. You're saying that consensual sex with adults and children is technically not immoral. It may be immoral today, but it may be moral tomorrow, right?
Well, no. What I'm saying is that the counter argument to biblical morality is the morality of the consensus of a group. In other words, they'll say, of course, having sex with a child is immoral. That's the argument. And we look at the biblical example of child sexuality as immoral based on our standard. I'm not saying that standard is right. I'm not saying it's wrong. What I'm saying is that's the argument. The argument we made is like, like the whole thing with Muhammad and Aisha being 9 years old. They say, well, that's just sick. Well, at the same time, the agreement of the society was that this was cool and okay, and this was, the whole 9 yards. We're only now stepping back and going, of course there's something wrong with the man having sex with a 9-year-old. It's not even really physically possible without injuring her.
On what basis? Well, if it's consensual, on what basis would a secular society establish anything to be wrong? And
right.
If you establish something to be wrong, why should it be wrong to me? If I wanted to create my own state within the union that endorsed something that you or group may consider immoral, I mean, how could you say it's wrong? Unless you're basing yourself off some sort of indisputable absolute authority like the Bible.
Right, but even right, I understand what you're saying because and it wouldn't even say the Bible, but Mishnah Torah talks about the age of majority. About there being an age of consent, which is what the phraseology age of majority alludes to. Now, whether society is basing that understanding off of Mishnah Torah, whether it's basing that off of religion or anything of that nature, I can't speak specifically. All I know is that the argument will come back. It's like, well, what does your religion offer? If we can say, listen, we shun and we punish child rape, we shun and we punish murder, we shun and we punish theft and dishonesty in business dealings and so forth and so on, breaches of contract and the whole 9 years. We punish these things because these things are normal. This makes sense to do. What would your argument be to someone who said that?
This isn't something you can package and hand over to the next generation in any way, right?
Mm-hmm.
You may say it's wrong to murder. The next generation may say it's okay to murder. Who's to guide our outcome as humans? Our own vote? I mean, is that what we want?
But history,
some form of ethical.
History is a great teacher.
Democracy?
As well, is it not?
Sure.
History is a great teacher. I mean, because we look at Auschwitz and we say absolutely atrocious and horrible, right?
I think only from a religious perspective. I mean, other societies that were godless had no problem with committing genocide if they
Hmm.
felt that the means justify the ends.
Hmm. So
So
do you think? Well, once again, Hitler did what he did as a Christian.
he didn't do it in the name of Christianity.
Yes, he did. I mean, if you've ever read
I,
Mein Kampf,
I
if you've
have
ever
read
read
Mein
Mein Kampf,
Kampf. I have read Mein Kampf. I mean,
he says it outright. He says matter of fact, he outlines and he specifically identifies Christianity as the basis for all moral contracts in a society and purging the scourge of the Jewish impure race. Based on the ideals of a pure Christian Aryan nation is, the salvation of the world and all future generations to come.
he
So,
attacked the Jews for being the founders of social democracy. He didn't attack the Jews because they were Jewish or kept Torah in any way, which is probably surprising for many Jews to hear nowadays.
mhm.
Now, the closest work ever attributed to Hitler, which I believe that was a forgery, was a book called Hitler's Table Talk, where he supposedly says that it was the Jews who introduced morality to society. This would be the biggest obstacle in him attempting to institute the survival of the fittest, or any type of secular view. I'm sure anyone listening out there would not believe that Hitler killed 6 million Jews in the name of Christianity or in the name of Jesus. If anything, we know that he was a pagan. He believed in a lot of astrology and even claims to have visions of spirits speaking to him and stuff like that. So
Right. Yeah, he was definitely. I mean, he got heavily involved in the occult because he thought it was going to help the Third Reich rise to power and so forth. No, definitively. But what I'm saying is history. However, as we look back on the mistakes of history, and we look back at all the conquesting wars of religion, namely Christianity and Islam, when we look back at things like Auschwitz, when we look back at genocide, the Hutu and the Tsitsi, or what was it, Hutu and Tsitsi of Africa. Yeah, we look back in history, basically lets us know, yeah, this is some horrible crap. I mean, this is humanity at its absolute worst. And one anthropologist made note of the fact that you can pretty much see some of the same language evolve in these societies to dehumanize a certain subset or a group of people. Basically, calling them apes and pigs and cockroaches and vermin and rats and
not to
and
the extent that we have seen this in secular societies. In the last 100 years, communism itself has been responsible for over 100 million murders. I think in the whole Inquisition, that many people are going to be surprised to hear.
But once again, communism is not a religious ideal. It's a social political ideal. It's not an a-religious ideal, or it's not a religious ideal. Communism, just like capitalism, has nothing to do with religion. It's about contracts. It's about social contracts. And so to blame communism, or to blame, let's say, atheism on communism, or the atrocities of communism on atheism, I think is misdirected. However, we do know that there are religious groups that have specifically killed in the name of their God. And now what's a shame is, who knew that Buddhists would start doing this crap now?
Sure.
The
Tamil Tigers. Anyways, we're discussing Judaism here, and what some radical Hindus or Buddhists may do, or Muslim, really don't affect the principles laid down in Torah. Right. Is really an altruistic book that has a goal of peace.
And historically, and rightfully, historically, we do not see Jewish atrocities against any other group of people. We do not see mass genocide of Jews against any group of people at all. However, except for the record given in Torah is the only one we see. And so, but which cannot be verified or denied in any way. It just exists. So yes, I would agree that by and large, you have Judaism standing head and shoulders above some of these other issues, because you don't see Jewish genocide. Jews simply don't do that. Now that doesn't make them any more human or better or whatever. That doesn't make Judaism any better or any worse than anything else necessarily. However, there is something to be said for that fact. Aside from the fact that you do have this this particular historical account that can't be proven. Going in and killing all the babies, so to speak. But anyway, so what we're talking about is we're talking about the transition being made from religious Jews to secularism. What do you think? What are your feelings about that? I mean, I know you disagree with a lot of man-made, specifically in the Orthodox arenas. I know you disagree with a lot of positions of Orthodox Jews, though technically you would be considered Orthodox Jew, which there's no dichotomy there. What do you feel the ultimate problem would be for someone, say, exploring reality, exploring, scientific knowledge and so forth, and as they become sort of disenchanted and disenfranchised from their Orthodox upbringing, do you see there's a problem by and large with that? Do you see that that's going to cause some huge issues, in the future for the world, for mankind? Is there salvation, or are these people okay? I mean, is it okay for them to explore these things and possibly die in this exploration as they walk out of something that you personally might consider might be worse, what that they're doing?
Maimonides states in the Guide for the Perplexed that if he knew God, he would be God. I believe that all of us, even those of us who claim to be Orthodox, are in a big way agnostic. We don't know. I mean, recently they read the diaries of Mother Teresa, how she would say that she also struggled in her faith. She held steadfast because it worked. It made the world a better place. I have no problem people questioning what appears in the Bible and considering other approaches, whether it's evolution, different approaches to creationism, which I don't believe make or break our religion in any way. Like I said, there are many rabbis who have written many books tying the two together. I don't think that's what's pulling people away from religion, at least not from Judaism. I think what's pulling people away from Judaism is other Jews, people who claim to be religious and behave in a certain way and really don't care about making the world a better place. I believe that someone who adheres to the instructions in the 5 books of Moses will do much more in bettering this planet than someone who establishes his own morality, who one day because he didn't have his coffee may murder someone, and the next day, because he dropped acid.
Starbucks is a hell of a drug.
Cocaine is a hell of a drug, right? Or like another day because he dropped acid, he's gonna donate $1 million. We can't be left like a wave to the sea to be thrown here and there. We need a code to live by, and I think no other code has been proven to be as reliable as the 5 books of Moses when practiced properly. Now, I don't think Orthodox Judaism practices it properly. The whole notion of hoarding goodness or hoarding the world's antidote is really unbecoming of anyone claiming to be a follower of anything good. And I think that's the main reason people go away. It's not because they hate Torah. I think they justify it with the garbage that religious people spew out and then try to justify leaving by attacking the Torah. I mean, it's not the other way around. It's not that they love religious people, with the exception of Mormons. I mean, I love Mormons. I think they're like the nicest people, even though they believe the weirdest things. Actually, my theory on Mormonism is that Joseph Smith was a fed-up Orthodox Jew who kind of felt like, like these guys are not doing what they're supposed to be doing with this great set of instructions. So I'm going to create a society that functions and works with all these biblical ethics, but I'm just going to set it up with such nonsense to show that decency is ingrained in man. Now, I'm not arguing for some humanistic approach, but I believe that the 7 laws of Noah are instilled in all of us, like a basic sense of morality. But I believe that it's the fault of religious people why there are so many secular people nowadays, because they're not making the argument. They're not walking the walk. I mean, they're really not practicing what they preach in terms of what Jews believe. I mean, they practice one thing, but Judaism is only for Jews, and the 7 laws are only for non-Jews. So they're not really preaching what they practice.
Right.
Right. I mean, I don't think the issue is the Bible at all. Well, at least not the 5 books of Moses. I think too much faith is a bad thing. I think it's almost like running your car with a bad alternator, and faith is your car battery. If on every stoplight you have to turn your car off and on, you're going to run out of juice. So that's why I think the Almighty limited His message to us within what's contained in the 5 books of Moses, and that's it. And He wanted us to do a lot with a little, because there's not really, apart from these little portions of areas that seem to be atrocities that were committed against these 7 Canaanite nations, which I believe could be explained other ways. apart from those things, it's a very civilizing law code that has really stood the test of time. I mean, unlike the Code of Hammurabi and all these other Roman laws, I mean, like, these are laws that actually work, they're moral, and they go against human nature. Who would really set up laws that go against what people actually want to do? I mean, like, murder could be wrong for me, but if, I don't know, someone gets someone pregnant, and it's probably better in his interest to kill that person. So who's to say I'm right and who's to say he's wrong but God? I believe in God because I stumbled across a set of instructions that work. And it made me think that if these set of instructions appeared at a time where people were bowing down to stones and pretty much compiled by nomads, this book had to be divinely inspired. Now, if there was a divine being that composed this book, this divine being must care for us, for him to establish a set of laws that speak not just to one set of men, but to all men. Absolute truths that, if adhered to, could make this world better. That makes me, one, believe in a creator, and two, believe that that creator loves me, and that's what makes me love him back. So my belief in God stems out of a belief system that I have seen works and gives me the honor of calling myself a Jew. Not because I was born in a certain religion. I converted to Judaism. I mean, I have no axe to grind here but goodness. I mean, if Judaism did not work and Islam worked, or some other set of instructions worked, I would tell everyone, join that movement, because truth is the signature of God. And I think that's what Maimonides was trying to say when he said that science and Torah cannot conflict. If something's true, it's by definition divinely inspired, because that's our goal, truth. And our ultimate goal is peace. And we think that truth is the ultimate building blocks of peace. So, I mean, I'm not... Yeah.
Or I was going to say a subsequent question. And then we're going to wrap up, because you said I guess before you ended, you said you wanted to share some things. I don't know if you want to share those things with me privately or,
I don't remember saying that. But that's fine.
I remember you saying it. You're saying my memory's faulty?
Yes, I think all this humanistic study is making your mind into mush.
Oh, okay.
All right, with all due respect.
Much learning has made me mad, like Paul the Apostle, right? What was I going to say? Okay. Non-Jewish homosexuals and lesbians, should they be shunned from normative society?
I don't believe that people or societies in the name of religion could impose religious values in a secular society. And I believe that it's left up to the states, to vote what they want according to the majority of people who live in that society. So that being said, I mean, I'm not trying to institute a messianic age in the United States. I mean, although, if I happen to live in Salt Lake City, Utah, I mean, I think that the laws in Utah should not resemble the laws in San Francisco. So that being said, I mean, I think that if my society wanted to establish laws to prohibit sodomy, to prohibit men kissing in public, I think they have the absolute right to do so, because we are a democracy. So, I mean, I can't really answer that from a secular perspective.
Now, I guess in sort of a apologetic sort of way, truth be told, kissing in public is prohibited among heterosexual Jews. I mean, you're not allowed to
show affection to that extent,
to your wife in public. Yeah, that's so. I do find it interesting that there's a lot of restrictions on sexuality from religion, not just Judaism, but almost all religions except maybe the Kama Sutra. That's what I'm converting to now. I'm kidding.
That's a book. I don't know if it's a religion.
It's a joke. You're messing up my joke. Anyway.
Okay, sorry.
But yeah, I mean, so to be fair, in a strictly Jewish society, even sexual type affection towards heterosexual couples would be prohibited, not to mention, of course, homosexual. So in that instance, it would be equal, I guess, for the lack of a better term.
Right. Well, I mean, to keep the property values up. I mean, only because heterosexuality is a norm. Like, do I want a prostitute standing in front of my house, while my kid's waiting for the school bus? No.
Right.
So.
Hey, Rabbi Asher, I'll see you Thursday at 2 o'clock.
All right. All right. Why Thursday? Right before Shabbat? All right.
Right. But so anyway, so yeah, well, that's great. Thank you so much, Rabbi
All right,
Asher,
man.
for
No problem.
entertaining the questions and digging as deeply as you did, and answering some of the things. And it looks basically the way I see it is that there's technically no real conflict between someone, having questions and exploring and looking at science and scientific things and exploring these things and maintaining a sense of their Jewishness. There's no real, major conflict there for them. And, it's possible for them to even continue, which of course we see. We see Jewish rabbis that are basically claiming to be agnostic. I mean, Orthodox rabbis are basically claiming to be agnostic, as you sort of alluded to before, and
maybe
basically
right.
would still maintaining their, religious habits, as it were, because of their upbringing and so forth. They see no conflict therein, and so I guess that aside from the fact that you believe in 6-day creation, I don't think we have any major conflicts, you and I.
That's a personal belief, and I believe that the Torah expects me to, but I don't attack rabbis who are able to justify it differently. As long as they're able to try to make an attempt to justify it instead of just hopping on the bandwagon.
Right, and the other thing too that most people don't know about religious Judaism is that there was provision made for if you skip a day of saying 100 blessings, and if you forget to put on your tallit, and if there's provisions made for
this is all rabbinic laws.
Right.
These are all rabbinic laws, which are, when there's a doubt, they should be adhered to lightly instead of from a heavy perspective. I tell people to focus on the ethical edicts in the Torah and to remain consistent and adhere to ritualistic rabbinical law. Mm-hmm. But many people confuse the two. Actually, nowadays, I think people elevate rabbinical law to Torah law, or don't know the difference.
Right.
Which is
so. So, in your opinion, would you reprimand, say me, for not donning tefillin, every morning, or not, for skipping days, or maybe a couple of weeks or whatever? Would that be a reprimandable thing for you as a rabbi to someone like?
There's different types of commandments. There's mainly hukim and mishpatim. So mishpatim are commandments between man and man, and hukim are commandments between man and God. So there's some commandments like tefillin that are clearly a hok, a command between man and God, that someone may not immediately make the connection on how is this actually making the world a better place. While commandments like do not murder, take care of the orphan, all these things, commandments between man and man that are more noticeable immediately as being altruistic in nature. I teach that any command between man and God is there to equip you in some way to serve your fellow man better. And we know tefillin, keeping the law in front of you, it's a physical reminder of all the ethical commands in the Torah, along with the ceremonial commands. So when you say, how could I reprimand someone who doesn't do this? I think that I could reprimand him because he's fallen in the error of first stage thinking. That only because I'm not able to make this connection, that connection doesn't exist. In terms of tefillin, I would be a little more harsher than in something completely rabbinic, which I would, if you're able to argue it.
Right, because it comes directly from, and you shall bind it upon your arm and write it upon your doorpost, and shall be frontless for your eyes, and so forth. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but something, let's say, I don't know, eating chicken with dairy. I think as long as you're not teaching others to go against the rulings of the Sanhedrin, it's not an issue. If you don't do it on your own, it's okay. Once I think you mentioned to me that you had an issue with something, and you said that I'm just going to do it, not to split the group, but when the Sanhedrin is recreated again, I'm going to take it up with them.
Right, yes, yeah, we've had those conversations, yes, I remember that.
I think that's what keeps a religion healthy in terms of ceremonial and ritualistic law. But anything ethical could never be argued. Right? That's what makes the Torah great. The Torah established ethics. Ceremonies, who really cares if there's 19 blessings and the 18 blessings of the benedictions are just 18, themselves, right? Because Shemona Esrei actually has 19 blessings. These things don't keep me up at night. Right. But anyone who breaks any of these laws, these rabbinical laws, are pretty much just breaking the major command that we should adhere to the ruling of the court for the sake of unity. I mean, unity is very important.
Right.
Because if we're not united, socially we're worthless. I mean, which is pretty much what Jews are
Mm.
nowadays. I mean, socially, they're
Right.
ethically.
Insular and isolated and judgmental and rude.
I'm just saying, if Christianity has an issue like with Proposition 8 or some other thing in America, it's like something happens. I mean, they make a difference. They fight. I mean, Jews don't really put apart from protesting against Nazis or this Baptist church that goes around,
Yeah, God hates fags.
Right. I mean, they're really
Westboro Baptist Church.
right. Like they're ethically and socially irrelevant. Right. I mean, they're not like in that area. I mean, I think Mormons, Christians, and sometimes even Muslims represent God better than Jews do. Yeah.
So what if we started a business in Colorado called the Jewish Weed Rabbi?
Oh well, I don't smoke weed, by the way. I mean, I've I never exhaled.
Jews historically have been involved in all sorts of trade and commerce and so forth, and since this is a natural product and it's legal.
I don't live in Colorado anymore, by the way.
Diamonds.
Right.
Right. Yes. Right.
Right. I don't know. No comment, man. But
It's a joke.
all right,
Please
cool.
don't go knocking on Rabbi Asher's door. He does not deal in such atrocities. I'm kidding. All right.
Okay.
So anyway, Rabbi Asher, just to make it clear for everyone before we hang up, Rabbi Asher is he is a Shmichad rabbi, lived in Israel, and so